I'm Sarah Russell.
I'm JQ Walker.
I'm Hind, and we are
the Neurodivergent Report, a research-based podcast by and for neurodivergent brains.
In each episode, we'll explore topics relating to neurodiversity and coping strategies by reviewing the literature and discussing current topics.
We will also have interview episodes where we sit down with experts in the field and listeners like you, with the hope that together we can all learn to heal in community.
However you are able to engage, thank you for being here. Yeah, so you were just about to tell me.
Yeah, the cards, and you saying, well, we'll draw a card. And then I was like, what are the cards? Tell me about it. I don't like unpredictability.
Yeah.
And that
right.
is one of the things that I realized post-diagnosis that I really struggle with, and why is lack of predictability. It's kind of like unpredictably, especially in work meetings, which I think is why I would script so much before meetings. And this got so much worse during COVID when everything was online in work calls. I would find I would prepare for hours and hours and hours for meetings and have like half of my screen would be the video call and the other half of my screen would be like a little A4 Word document of all the things I wanted to discuss. But that was taking up so much time. And then, yeah, I had my stress breakdown in late 2021, which was, less than 2 years after COVID started and I started doing this. And I was like, yeah, there's probably a correlation there. It gave me the excuse to overscript because no one could see I was doing it. But yeah, draw the card.
Everybody was secretly doing it in their free time, in their spare time.
Was scripting.
Gosh, yeah. A lot of us neurodivergents were spending a lot of time preparing for those meetings or recovering from those meetings.
Yeah.
So it goes or maybe both.
Yeah, well, and I was finding, and then you got the messages that kind of bosses were concerned that people were working less at home than they were in the office. And I was like, I am working at least
way
half
more
as much again at home because of exactly like we said, A, the preparation, and B, the recovery.
Yeah, we're going to talk about you. I think this is a perfect segue into who are you? Why am I talking to you? Basically, who are you? So you are Struan Mackenzie.
Yes.
And you used to be a civil servant in the UK.
I'm still a civil servant at the moment.
Still are at the moment.
Probably going to take a bit of a break and look at something else shortly.
I was unsure where you were in that journey since we last spoke.
Still plugging away. Still trying to help the UK government stay afloat in these trying times.
Indeed. Okay, so you are currently still working for the UK government. Bless your soul. But you're also a YouTuber.
Yes, about 2 years ago, maybe slightly longer than 2 years ago, and not long after I was diagnosed. So I should actually probably say...
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about your channel.
So yeah, I was a civil servant, a UK civil servant on and off for the last 15 years after a bit of a random career journey before that. I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland originally and moved to London in England. About 20 years ago at this point. Worked in Parliament for a Member of Parliament as a researcher, and then jumped across into the civil service where I've worked for various departments, Department for Education, Energy and Climate Change, Cabinet Office, Foreign Office, International Development. And
just bouncing around.
Just bouncing
helping
around.
People fill out forms.
Again, I look back on with the benefit of being a late diagnosed AuDHD and kind of see that I would excel in certain roles and then start feeling out of my depth and start feeling the spotlight on me and the pressure and then jump sideways. It's one of the good things about working in the civil service, at least the UK civil service. It facilitates sidewards movement. You can bounce around quite a lot, which was kind of ideal for me for a long time until it wasn't. So I did this for about 15 years until I had a stress breakdown, which kind of in my head kind of seemed to come out of nowhere in late 2021, early 2022. But kind of looking back with the benefit of hindsight, I can see it was just the latest in a long line of mini burnouts that I just eventually had a major burnout. And during this time, so I got signed off after I had my burnout, and I was trying to work out what was going on in my head, why I'd had this burnout. And I did one of these online tests. I'd read an article online that was actually about parents whose kids had been diagnosed at school as being on the autism spectrum, and that led them to realize that they themselves were autistic, which happens to a lot of people. I don't have kids, but I related to a lot of what was being said in the article, and then there was a little link to a self-test in that. So I went and did the self-test out of curiosity, because I've always been curious about these sort of things, trying to work out my personality, because I never quite understood my personality. So I got obsessed with like Myers-Briggs types and personality tests and all these sort of things. Eventually did this autism test, scored really high, and that was my kind of penny drop, like kind of 3-4 years ago. It was like, oh, right, okay. And neurodivergence was just not on my radar whatsoever before this. So then I kind of rabbit holed, because that's what we do, and read more and more about it. And it was like, oh my goodness, this explains so much of all the quote unquote weird things that I've struggled with over the years. This is why I get really overwhelmed in crowds. This is why I have to get off busy transport. This is why I can't hear conversations in busy pubs and restaurants. All these, what felt like a multitude of things that were going on with me, were basically narrowed down to kind of one thing that was going on with me, one umbrella, which had lots of explanations. So I there's a huge waiting list for autism assessments in the UK.
I had a whole episode on that.
Yeah, there's a lot, and one of the advantages from having worked for the civil service, counterbalancing the disadvantages of giving me a stress breakdown in the first place, was that it's like, no one gets into the civil service to make a fortune, but it's a decent salary, and I don't have a particularly lavish lifestyle. So I'd been able to kind of build up enough savings. I could use my privilege to say, I don't want to wait for 2.5 years. I want to know if I'm autistic or not now. So paid to have a private assessment, and got that done pretty quickly. And then they confirmed that I was on the autism spectrum, or they really confused me, because the way they described it is like, you have what used to be called Asperger's. So then I was like, okay, so what's it called now?
Cool.
And then there was this whole confusion over like, you're telling me what I've not got, what have I got? But then I kind of like, I understood the new nomenclature and understanding autism spectrum through that lens. So I, for the first time in my life, had a bit of therapy with kind of sort of neuroaffirmative therapist. And after I think 3 of them said, I think you have got ADHD as well as autism. I went through the same process, got onto a waiting list for ADHD, was told again there'd be like a 2-year wait. And then again, I was like, oh, I'm going to spend more of my money and just burn through my savings to get an ADHD assessment. Then came back with severe combined ADHD, not only a little bit of ADHD, severe combined ADHD. And then for the first time, and this was almost a year, I got the ADHD diagnosis almost a year after the autism diagnosis. And then for the first time, I'm like, okay, there's this new thing. Not only am I learning about ADHD, in addition to autism, I'm now learning about AuDHD, which again was a term that I'd never had.
So are we all.
Started rabbit holing on that, and then found there ain't nearly as many resources on AuDHD as there are on either autism or ADHD, because it's pretty new.
They're all being written right now. So just not to talk about me, but I have been an ADHD coach since like 2001, and I focused mostly on executive functioning. And there was research at that time that was coming out about how emotional regulation is also a part, but it's not part of the diagnosis officially. And then somewhere in 2023, the research started to look at both and be like, is ADHD and autism even a distinct thing? And the consensus is still out on that. I have a problem with how they do the whole DSM,
Yep.
but that's a different podcast episode.
Yep.
Anyway, so yeah, and that's when in 2023, 2024, I started seeing lots more blog posts coming out, self-tests kind of thing, community spaces. But yeah, it's all like we're like on the frontier, and it feels awesome and scary in some ways.
Exactly. It's that thing. And I think I love a system. I love an explanation. And I think when we spoke previously, I mentioned that I spent my first kind of year and a half after getting the diagnosis being like, right, where's the instruction manual? Now that I know that my brain's wired differently, I've been working to the wrong instruction manual, give me the instruction manual. And to a certain extent, there's almost instruction manuals for autism or ADHD, but combined there ain't nothing. And that's been a bit of a mental block for me to get past, to essentially be like, you have to be a magpie. You have to create your own system based from what's out there and what works for people, which takes me to my my YouTube channel that I started doing. Essentially, the plan at the beginning was to do 52 episodes.
Your YouTube channel, by the way, which is called Am I Neurodivergent?
Called Am I Neurodivergent? Thank you for the plug. I'm really bad at this sort of thing, talking about it.
It's super fine. We're learning together.
So I set up this channel called Am I Neurodivergent? Which was in part just to help me process. And I started doing the videos about kind of like, okay, this is basically week 1 of my journey. This was week 2 of my journey. This was week 3, 4. And I was going to do 52. But then I got kind of diverted by other things because I was still living my life in real time and learning new things. And then
because you have AuDHD, and so consistency is like not a thing you have.
I set a system and then immediately get distracted from the system and want to do something else and ping off. But yeah, so it started off pretty small. Well, it still is pretty small compared to some of the bigger YouTube channels that are out there. But the first few episodes were essentially just like kind of a couple of dozen people that were getting in touch, and I was getting a kick that I was getting any kind of comments. And then I think it was about the 7th video I did, which was on imposter syndrome, suddenly kind of blew up a little bit. And then it was in the hundreds rather than the dozens. And then I think episode 9, which is still to this day my most viewed video, was on the ADOS assessment itself, which is what the main assessment that is used in the UK for autism assessments. And then
they use that for children in the US too.
Yeah. It was weird when I did, like, because I obviously got an adult assessment, and like some of the exercises in the ADOS were like going through children's books and asking what you think, or kind of putting toys, or it's like, I'm an adult man in my 40s. Like, I work for the civil service. I'm in Mensa. Why are you getting me to do like children's exercises? This is weird. But I guess we're growing and adapting, and as more and more adults
can you also stop and tell the audience what Mensa is? Because Mensa membership has been receding for decades.
Oh, it's like it's stupid. So Mensa membership is a very, very outdated IQ-based club that if you used to have membership of Mensa, it was like, oh, you're super clever, you've got like a high IQ. And I think after I had my stress breakdown and got the autism diagnosis, I went through a bit of a crisis of identity and was in the process of kind of rebuilding my identity. And then there's still a lot of stigma around an autism diagnosis. Certain friends and family may have reacted quite strangely to it. So I basically took the Mensa test as a self-indulgent kind of, I want to convince myself that I'm smart, and did it and got it. And
I'm the right kind of autistic.
And it was kind of, I've since rescinded my membership because it was kind of like you get charged kind of like annually just to be in it. And I was like, that was kind of a stupid thing.
The elitism is not Asperger's friendly.
Like, it was like kind of, this is a pointless kind of thing but I think it was part of my reconstructing identity thing,
Yeah.
because it really shook my confidence. I think getting the diagnosis and kind of like wondering, and there's probably a bit of like internalized ableism that was going on with me as well, that I had to kind of work my way through. And it's just been a whole journey, and that was probably part of it. But no, it's not something I'm particularly proud of. I wasn't trying to get that in as like a brag or anything. It was more just to kind of that when I was sitting there getting the assessment, it was like, this is why am I being treated like a child? It's
So yeah, exactly. I didn't take it that way. I feel like knowing what Mensa is niche knowledge.
okay.
Um, and so I always like to go back and like talk about niche knowledge.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it's like
And
like
also
you.
because the juxtaposition of they were giving an adult child assessments, and it's really, and even for some children these assessments are way too infantile.
Mm,
Like my 2-year-old has been assessed using the same thing, and he was in like the 6-year-old section on some of the like cognitive and physical abilities. Um,
I think
yeah,
I think there needs to be a complete paradigm shift in the way people are assessed for neurodivergence. Whether that's
it's like not IQ.
it's not IQ based. It's not kind of, and I went to a talk a while back. I think it was over the summer in the UK, the Autism and ADHD show, and I heard a
Mm.
talk by, I think it was Dr. Luke Bearden, who's really good, and was even saying like, why do we even need tests to confirm that someone's neurodivergent or not? If there's enough knowledge out there about it, you just know. Like you don't need a test to know whether you're gay or straight or bi or anything on that spectrum. You know. You feel it, you
Mm-hmm.
read about it, you don't like why is it with neurodivergence when it's so much more common than was previously even realized, to have to go and sit in a room and have a medical professional sit and just make you feel as if it's still so medicalized.
Well,
And
exactly. It's because psychiatry at its core is like a means of social control.
but
Um,
I also know
and
the
it has
counter.
been used like by the state to weaponize um, people. I don't know, just to
But I
sort of
also get
criminalize behavior.
the counterpoint that when you have higher support needs, you need that bit of paper to be able to have access to certain support
Sure.
and certain benefits. And so as
The
with
civil servant in you.
as with all of these things, there's two sides to the coin on all of it. And I'm trying a lot harder again since diagnosis. I know that I can get into the kind of black and white, rigid thinking aspects a little tight. Something is right or something is wrong. And I'm trying to push
Mm.
myself a lot more to be there's two sides to most things, and there's a nuanced middle way through most of all this. But what the
I
nuanced
hate
middle way
that because it
elements are,
feels like there's no right or wrong.
and I
You
hate
know?
that.
And it just comes down to, like, who can argue the best, and I just don't have the energy for that. I don't wanna argue my point. I don't wanna prove anything to anybody anymore. I'm a tired woman. I'm too young to be talking like this too, that's the worst part.
But I think burnout gets so. I mean, it's the horrible
Yeah.
reality that kind of life expectancy is substantially lower for neurodivergent people, and I think it's because we get so exhausted and fatigued, and our
Mm.
nervous systems are constantly running on high alert, and particularly with over 40s, or I think even with over 30s as well. And the older you get up the age range, the higher the percentage of no diagnosis are, that you've got undiagnosed neurodivergent people that are just struggling to get through life without knowing how their brain works, without knowing, and just masking and trying to get through, and then we start dropping like flies. Cheery thought.
Yeah, gosh, and that's the ones that make it, through their maladapting coping habits,
Yeah.
the drinking and the the other stuff. So
Oh,
anyway,
the drinking is something. I think, yeah, when we talked the first time, I was saying that with my channel, I was really, really religious with it and kind of was like new episode every week, work, 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 work,
yeah.
work. And then it kind of, the frequency of it kind of tailed off. I'd done all the kind of, this is what I've learned about autism. This is what I've learned about ADHD. This is my journey. And I did separate chapters on like my childhood, my teens, my 20s, my 30s and early 40s. And then once I got onto, okay, so I've got both conditions. Now the remaining videos are about AuDHD. I kind of stopped and froze because it was like, I don't know, I'm still learning. I don't feel like I've got any kind of authority to, like, it's just my, and particularly having kind of thousands of people now watching them, I was like, I don't feel like I have the authority to, but then I'm getting back into, all I can do is share my experience. When we're at such a nascent stage of understanding ADHD, all I can really do is share my understanding of it. And just you mentioning alcohol, even in the last couple of weeks, I've reached this understanding about my relationship with alcohol, which I'd never understood before. Like, I don't like drinking, but when I drink,
Mm,
I keep drinking and I keep drinking and I keep drinking. And I never really understood why I did that. And I would get so, I would drink so much that I would get really sick with it. And
ew.
so I tried to stop, and I've tried to kind of not, and I don't think I'll have like an alcohol dependency or a addiction or anything like that. It started off as like a social coping because of
Mm-hmm.
the is it the glutamate GABA balance between kind of the way that alcohol can kind of calm your brain and take away your anxieties, but on the autism spectrum, which I hadn't realized, when it rebalances, there's this huge big crash, this crash that goes more than your average bear. And it can have almost a sedative effect, like you crash really, really badly. Because I'd noticed, even if I would just have one beer with lunch, I'd go out with friends, pub lunch, noisy atmosphere. I'd be like, well, I can't get through this without at least one beer. Would have one beer. And then even after one beer, I would need to sleep. I'd suddenly have a massive crash and just be like, no, I need to go and like sleep for 2 hours. And it was only in the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks that I've realized that this is related to being neurodivergent. And you have this huge, big crash after the kind of the calmness that the alcohol brings. And so it doesn't matter whether you have, or for me personally, whether I have one drink or 7 or 8 drinks, that when I stop, that crash is going to come. And I had a friend down from Scotland, a childhood friend, a few weeks ago, and he likes a drink. And I was kind of saying to him, right, look, I've found out this thing about myself. I cannot start drinking until late in the evening, because if I start drinking with you, and he was down, he was away from his family and kids, he was just sort of like, yeah, I'm in London, let's go out drinking from like morning onwards. And I was like, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
And he found it
Yeah. No.
hilarious that I was basically telling him, if I stop drinking, I will pass out, because I therefore have to keep drinking to not pass out. He thought that was the most hilarious thing that he'd ever heard, that like once I start, I have to keep going.
I really relate to that though, and I always thought it was to do with my metabolism being fast, but when I used to go out, I would just start getting hungover while still out at the bar with people. I'd just like pee it all out, and I'd start getting my headache, and I'd be super dehydrated and just like really hungry, and I'm just like, can we go? And nobody else I know has that experience.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm also like a naturally dizzy person. I have like fainting syndrome
Oh,
or
really?
whatever. They call it POTS now.
Okay.
So it's like circulation problems. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. The central nervous system is crazy. And actually, we know now that alcohol affects the autonomic nervous system a
Mm.
lot. That's the heart rate, that's the breathing, that's the like not being in control of your body from the alcohol. But yeah, I never thought how alcohol might affect neurodivergence more. Um,
Yeah,
that's so
have a
interesting.
Google and a
I
search
I
around
just
for it.
know that
It's,
we
yeah.
like give ourselves lots of shame.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I could feel like
So
I was aware from a relatively young age And I think there's certainly in Scotland where I grew up, there's a, or at least there used to be when I kind of grew up in the 90s, when you're teenagers, you just start drinking. That's what you do. Like, I think Scotland had a reputation for a long time, maybe still does have a reputation, kind of along with the Irish, of being very big drinkers. But particularly when you're a Scottish boy, Scottish teenage boy, you just start drinking as soon as possible. And I was aware that I wasn't reacting to alcohol quite the same as a lot of my friends, particularly with the sleepiness.
Mm-hmm.
I've had, potentially looking back, really dangerous situations where I would just have this crash. I'd go out and try and socialize and be quote unquote normal, and then just would have the complete crash and be like, I need to sleep now. I'm going to go and sit. And it wasn't even that I was like blackout drunk or fall down drunk. I'd just be so exhausted all of a sudden from this crash. And then, yeah, just from Googling recently about neurodivergence and the effects of alcohol, it can be, when you stop, it can be like a massive sedative. And I've like gone and slept in people's gardens and like in alleys. And I was like, that's so dangerous. I absolutely could have been mugged and had my wallet stolen. And like,
Sure, that is very serious. You're
it's like, and
right.
it genuinely wasn't because I'd had so much to drink that I was pass out drunk. I knew I do not have enough energy to
Mm-hmm.
like get a cab home or get a bus home or whatever. I am going to
Right,
need to
but
sleep in the
yeah,
next
if,
5
like, the
minutes.
police had found you, they might not have given you the benefit of the doubt that you just process your alcohol differently.
Yeah, no one would. If I
You
tried to say,
know?
what you need to understand is my glutamate GABA balance and my neurodivergence. If I saying that to the police in the 90s, like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Oh my gosh. So, okay, so good thing that we went back to your childhood, because when you were talking earlier about, you know, your entire diagnosis journey, I noticed that it all happened when you were an adult, sort of from your own, like, searching, because you never really felt like you belonged.
yeah. I'd
Same.
always.
Um, how was it missed in childhood? How were you able to compensate for your AuDHD that it wasn't addressed in childhood?
I think, like, when I grew up in Scotland in the 80s and 90s, knowledge of autism spectrum, ADHD, neurodivergence in general was, I would say, practically non-existent. And my cousin's a primary school teacher now, and so many kids are picked up. Like, obviously, there's still improvements that can be made, but the comparison between when I was at school and that is huge in terms of acceptance, knowledge, understanding,
Yeah.
adjustments, just trying to make things easy for kids. And there was just it wasn't that kind of my teachers or educators were actively hostile. It was just there was a kind of a one size fits all education system. And if that wasn't working for you, then the problem was with you. It wasn't with the system. And
Yeah.
particularly when I got my ADHD assessment, the assessors asked if I had access to any old school reports, because part of the ADHD assessment is looking at kind of current behaviors and challenges and historic behaviors and challenges and trying to see if there's a through line. It's not just a kind of a phase you're going through briefly. This has been consistent behaviors and
Yeah,
challenges.
the DSM, the diagnostic manual, specifically says these behaviors have to take place in multiple, like, arenas. So at home, at work, at school, you know, and they have to cause, like, a pervasive disturbance, you know.
So I had kept, or I hadn't kept, my mum had kept all my school reports from primary school. Well, actually,
Is
from,
she a hoarder?
I don't know that she's a hoarder. She's kept a lot of my childhood stuff. Certainly, they wrote.
She just loves you.
I found out laterally they wrote a report on me in nursery. I was such a peculiar kid in nursery that one of the teaching assistants at my nursery, kindergarten, in American terminology, wrote was doing her formal teaching qualification and picked me to write a report on because my behavior was really unusual. And apparently I would arrive at nursery, not speak to any of the other kids, repeatedly walk around the outside the periphery of things, decide what I wanted to do. And frequently I would go over to a particular bookcase, which had a kind of net curtain, pull back the net curtain, really methodically take out all the books that were in this bookcase and stack them out, get into the bookcase and draw the curtain behind me. And it was like, yeah. So you can see that no one had any idea of autism spectrum, because now I look back and be like, that's kind of textbook. And I would also line up my cars, my toy cars, like really, really neatly in kind of like order of size, and then kind of push them around the edge of the room. And so, yeah, this woman, bless her, wrote a nursery report on me. I got back in touch with my nursery to try and read this report, but she's long since retired or not with us, and I couldn't get hold of it. But yeah, I think I was missed just because no one had any idea what was being looked for. But the school reports from primary school up through secondary school that I had, my ADHD assessor read them even before we did the full interview and said, kind of, if you were getting these school reports now at school, you would instantly be referred for, at minimum, an ADHD assessment, if not an autism assessment as well. Consistently, year after year, my report cards were like, bright kid, difficulty focusing, can't seem to organize his work. What was it? One of my teachers said, Struan always seems to be a step removed from the rest of the world. So it's just all this consistent feedback going all the way through. But the thing that was made me sad looking back, looking at my school reports, was from primary school. It was all kind of, Struan always has lots to say in group situations. He always has an opinion. He can occasionally blurt things out and not wait his turn. And then as the years went past and I moved from primary school to secondary school, the reports about how I would interact with my classmates, I became like increasingly withdrawn until my last year of secondary school. I was getting reports like Struan can cut quite an isolated figure. He often doesn't speak in class. He's very withdrawn, intelligent kid, but doesn't speak up. It just like it complete. So from having been in that system, from having not been
Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Well, basically,
but obviously
broke me.
It was from experience.
Yeah, it basically broke me, and I think I went from being quite a happy kid to being a very unhappy teenager. Just by operating in that system, by consistently being told you're bright but you're lazy, you're underachieving, you're not fulfilling your potential, and I started to believe that.
And you talk a lot.
Yeah, so it was like I just turned the volume down on myself.
Yeah, that I mean, I ask everybody this question to kind of highlight how similar we all kind of are, because I also have pretty much that same experience.
Right.
You know, I was a girl, went to primary school in the 90s, and I was very smart and very talkative, and I did weird things like chew on everything. You know, and I knew a lot of random facts. But I was pretty delightful. But then at some point I learned that like other people didn't like me because I could never quite figure it out. You know, I always had like a bunch of ideas. But you know, sometimes they were things like, it's because I'm too pretty, and then people would really not like that. So I tested a bunch of things and never really understood why people didn't like me. But I think it has to be the neurodivergence and just not understanding how to interact. Because now I look at my mom and she doesn't know how to interact. And I look at my dad and he's just kind of mean and brutish. And so that wouldn't have been a good role model either. Yeah, and so, you know, being very bright, like you compensate. Nobody picks up on it until you become a problem.
Yeah.
I like decided to deprioritize school because nobody likes smart girls. And that wasn't good. That was a bad choice. That was a bad life decision.
And did you go to college? Did you go to university, or did
I did.
deprioritizing? Yeah, okay.
I did end up making it through. It took like 6 or 7 years to get my bachelor's, but I made it and I got my bachelor in sociology. Um, Yay. I had intended on going to get like a master's degree of some sort, but I could never pick. Like I could never niche myself down because getting a master's degree is so specific. It's like not very neurodivergent friendly. Academia is very much like that. It's good for a certain type of neurodivergent and nobody else.
I miss academia, and if I could go back with the knowledge that I've got now, I would do things very differently. So I dropped out of university. I went to university, but I dropped out because I think the structure, and I think this happens to a lot of people, a lot of neurodivergent people, particularly from having read a few books and memoirs for people, that the structure of school falls away at university, and you have to be much more self-reliant and rely on your
Yeah.
own systems, rely on your own motivation, rely on your own, just essentially the structure goes, and you can really struggle. And I certainly really struggled. I was constantly handing work in late, and I was getting good grades, but I was getting marked down for lateness constantly, so
Mm.
my grades weren't as good as they would have been. And I was hauled in front of kind of senior lecturers and tutors and stuff to say, what's going on with you? Why are you incapable of handing anything in on time? Like, you're a bright kid, you're getting good marks, the same kind of thing, but you're letting yourself down. So this just perpetuated this narrative from school, this kind of like bright
Mm-hmm.
kid, lazy, not living up to his potential. Then I ended up dropping
Not
out,
doing things
not
right.
doing things the right way. But I always felt kind of dumb because I dropped out of university. I didn't have a degree, which is probably, looking back, why I had this big chip on my shoulder. So when I got my diagnosis, I took the Mensa test. Looking back to that, it was like to prove myself.
Me too. I definitely have an insecurity
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
not getting a higher degree.
So
Yeah.
I went back, and again, this is probably in a similar kind of proving. Actually, no, it wasn't, because I did this just before I had my breakdown and got the diagnosis. But I went back a few years ago, about 5-6 years ago, and did a master's. So I finally got a proper qualification. Did a distance master's through SOAS, which is a part of the University of London. And it
For what?
damn near killed me, but I did it and got it. Oh, I did it in global diplomacy, because I'm really interested in like international politics and international relations and all that kind of stuff. And I think I wanted to jump from the UK civil service into the international civil service. Like, it had always been my dream since I was a kid to work for the UN, but having done that, having got the master's in global diplomacy, and then having started to see, okay, did that, now how can I get a job in the UN? I kind of realized just how difficult it is to get a job in the UN, and how damn near impossible that jump, that transfer would have been. And having spoken to people that work in the UN, like most people have hated working in the UN that have got there. So I don't know if it would have been
Yeah.
a kind of.
I've just learned some interesting things about the UN as well. Like, did you know that the countries have to pay membership dues to be a part, even if the membership due is like larger than the GDP of the country?
Yeah, and there's lots of
They
borrowing.
don't like have a waiver or anything.
There's
Um,
lots of borrowing, and then the poorer countries get more and more into debt, and yeah, it's. I think I still
Borrowing.
believe in the UN, but I almost think it's so ineffective, and we've seen that over the last few years with everything that's going on in various parts of the world. It's such an ineffective organization. I almost think it has to take a step back to take two steps forward, or be
Mm.
reconstituted the same way as kind of the League of Nations collapsed and then became the UN later. I don't know if something like that's going to happen again.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't read about that in decades. Um, that's That's fascinating.
I don't know whether it'll come to pass or not, but it feels like a very ineffective organization that's constantly gets itself stuck and in stalemate and can't agree resolutions and things are vetoed and nothing really happens other than finger
Yeah.
wagging, and countries can abuse their own citizens, and yeah.
I'm curious, um, what you learn in diplomacy classes. Like, is it a lot of conflict resolution type stuff? Because that is so needed right now.
Not so much. I'm trying to think. It was about five,
No.
6 years ago I did it now. I'm trying to think what my modules were. I think I did one in international law, one on the history of the
Mm,
United Nations.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
what else did I do? I can't quite remember all the different modules I took at the moment. My dissertation I did
Yeah.
on nation states, state sovereignty, and whether the model of state sovereignty is still relevant in the 21st century, or with kind of cross-border issues, whether that's climate change, whether that's security, cybersecurity, terrorism, like whether the existing model works, and whether having
Mm-hmm.
politicians who are thinking very, very short term, medium term at most towards the next electoral cycle, whether that really works for tackling the world's problems.
Yeah, it seems really ineffectual.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll get into.
I remember you brought this up last time, and it was really interesting to imagine a new system, you know. What could the government look like without elected officials?
Oh, without
Um,
elected. Oh, yeah, we were talking about the UK Parliament, and I'll get slated by some people. It's not.
yeah, we don't need to record that then.
No, no, no. It's fine.
Uh,
It'll be like a. I don't know. What. Correct me if I go off on a different tangent, but I think what we were talking about last time was I was saying that particularly in the UK, and I guess more widely as well, elected representative democracy, elected
mhm,
politicians who are career politicians, they set out to be politicians, they try to get into these positions of influence. Particularly with the UK system, when you have members of parliament that represent different constituencies across the country. I mean, this used to work hundreds of years ago, because if something happened in, say, a part of Scotland where a river had burst its banks and had caused a lot of damage, and like you basically needed an MP to kind of come down to Parliament on horseback or in a carriage and
get
tell
on a horse.
yeah,
Yeah,
basically come and tell everyone that this was happening, or this is
yeah,
happening in my constituency. You need to release a bit of money, you need to release a bit of funding, but like it's the 21st century, and we've got this rolling
yeah. Now we
24-hour
just send an
news
email.
coverage, and like instantly you know what's happening. And I genuinely fantasize about a new. I mean, you'll have seen, obviously America doesn't get as much coverage of British politics as Britain gets of American politics, but you'll have seen the kind of confrontational Houses of Commons with kind of one party on the other and the other party on the other, banging the tables, shouting at
Hmm.
each other. It's still very, very confrontational. It's not a collaborative political system. And I would absolutely love to see a system where you essentially get rid of elected politicians, and on one side of the House, you have what many people would call unelected bureaucrats. I would call civil servants, but accountable civil servants. You have to have accountability on one side and members of the public on the other, where members of the public can directly come and raise issues. But instead of a political response, you just have civil servants, you just have bureaucrats that are like, okay, we've heard you, this is what we can do about it. Because the main frustration I've found as a civil servant on and off for 15 years is how bogged down we get by politicians in being able to do things, because we have,
Mm.
particularly over the last few years, British politics has been so chaotic. Your minister could change like every few months. So just when you've got a steer on delivering certain priorities and certain programs from one minister, the minister changes, you get a new minister in charge. So you've got this rotating list of politicians who set the direction.
Mm.
who may only be in post for a few months, and you're trying to do your job, you're trying to make a difference for the people of the country, and you continue like, oh my goodness, we've got a new one, right? Briefings to this new person, briefings to this person. These are the programs we've been doing. Are you happy to continue these programs? Do you have different priorities? And then you just get in place with that new leader of captain of the ship, and then they get moved on and another person comes in. It's such an ineffective system. So yeah, that's replace adversarial party politics with bureaucrats on one side and members of the public on the other. That would be my dream. But then that's pretty
I
much
like
spelling out the end of democracy, and a lot of people would be up in arms at that and say kind of like, oh, that's, but it wouldn't be, it would just be abolishing representative democracy. It would be a lot closer to like the agora, the original agora of direct democracy. But like this time it wouldn't just be male landowners that can vote. Everyone would have a voice, everyone would have a vote, and big important decisions that are contentious have referendums. Like referendums have not gone particularly well in the UK, but somewhere like Switzerland has multiple referendums on all sorts of things, and you just get into the habit of going and voting and saying, okay, there's a contentious issue. What do you think? Here's options A, B, and C. You
There
give
just
your
has to
opinion.
be a better process for it.
Yeah, there really does.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, politics in this country, or politics in your country as well, it's getting so divisive, and the rhetoric is getting so toxic and partisan. It's just who is this serving? Like,
Yeah.
who is it serving?
Yeah.
And
the people with the money.
Yeah, always follow the money. Who does it serve?
Not to sound crazy, but it's pretty clear that the laws aren't made to benefit like wealth concentration at the bottom.
Yeah.
I think also for the sake of the global economy, we should definitely do something about the politicians.
Yeah. But then
anyway,
basically there's not really a third
Sorry.
option that ever gets presented. It's you've got kind of
No.
and this has been going on, I
How
guess,
do we get there?
I guess since the Cold War.
How do we get the
World War
people with the
II.
power to give it up?
Well, yeah, that's going to be the hard bit, isn't it?
Isn't that in diplomacy class?
How to get the powerful to what really
de-escalation
tickles me is how people like Trump in the States, or people like, I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Nigel Farage over here, incredibly wealthy people, businessmen, financiers that come in and start raging against the elite and start kind of stirring up the masses against the elite. We have to do something about the elite. And you're just like, there could not be any more of a representation of the elite than you. But what are you? But yeah, use dog whistles and distracts people, and yeah, is what it is. Yeah, that can be my mission for leave the civil service, help get rid of elected politicians. I mean, there'd be all sorts of problems.
People make fun of communications majors as if they're not doing important work, but people who are countering propaganda are doing important work. I think the people in power who are trying to convince us that like, oh, these people are your enemy, meanwhile they're stealing from our pocketbooks, they stay on the offensive so that we have to stay on the defensive. If we're always arguing against why we're not bad, then we never get a chance to say why they are terrible. So yeah, I learned that when I was in an abusive relationship.
Right. Okay.
So that's just a really neat overlap.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of framing it. Do you guys have in the States, with your kind of media and news channels and whatnot, something the BBC in the UK has started doing over the last few years is this service called Verify, which is like fact checking, because it's become so normalized to just essentially lie and make false statements and exaggerate to the extent of untruths, and then that just becomes accepted wholesale as different sides of an argument. And it's like, well, no, that's not different sides of an argument. That's just essentially lying to turn up the
You just
volume on
made
the
that up
argument.
right now.
But
That's libel.
yeah, exactly. So
Um,
BBC have started doing this fact-checking service with what's been
that's so
said and what's
cool.
being reported, which I think is quite valuable.
No, absolutely not. We don't have anything like that, and it's not likely to start. No, I think channel by channel, there are some news stations who have started fact checking like certain people, but in general, the law here doesn't require the news media to be truthful or to present both sides of an argument. That law changed like 30 to 50 years ago, and it's directly responsible for a lot of what we're seeing now,
Interesting.
because the people who control the messaging control the masses.
Yeah. What would you do if you could go back and do a master's? What would you do? Would it be in communications or something similar?
No, actually, it would probably be something like masochistic, like law.
Okay. So it's a useful thing to have.
And like I would position myself as like one of those judges that are being like kidnapped and murdered in their homes right now. That's absolutely wild that I could just say that factually in 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely something legal, I think. Just because there aren't enough people, just like 10 to 15 years ago, there weren't enough people who were neurodivergent in the mental health field.
Mm.
There are not enough neurodivergent and disabled people and just general minorities in the representative democracy. Who does this represent, Boo?
And it's yeah, and I've noticed. I don't know how much experience you've had with therapy, but I found like even with I never had any therapy until the last few years, and then I kind of
Oh.
burned through therapists because they weren't immediately solving all my problems within a few sessions, and I was like, oh, you're no good. I need
Mhm.
to go on to someone else. But even after I kind of settled down, it shocked me, even in mental health professionals and therapists, how limited a knowledge of neurodivergence is out there with mainstream therapists. And it's like kind of,
Yeah.
you must have had, over the years, you must have had dozens, if not hundreds, of, what you want to call them, patients or clients or whatever, who were neurodivergent, and you've had no idea whatsoever. And you've probably been giving them advice for neurotypical people that's caused them more harm than good. Like, how can there be
Yes.
this amount of ignorance with mental health professionals and therapists and counselors? I mean,
Yeah. Mental health advocates have been pushing for like um person first language, kind of like the neurodiversity model or the social model, pushing more like the idea that the disability is in only in the context of the society
mm,
structure. So I think that was the overcorrection to the medical model.
mm,
Um, and I don't know that everybody's willing to admit that society is the problem. You know, there are large numbers of people that this current configuration works just fine for.
mm.
Um, but yeah, it's just about explaining how it could be better for everyone, and nobody has to sacrifice quality,
So,
except for maybe the billionaires.
well, yeah, and they ain't going to give any of that up. Of all the people you've spoken to on your podcast and all the people you've met and had their views, are there kind of common themes that are coming through that you've heard about what does society look like for neurodivergent, not just for neurodivergent people, but for all people, just being more combined and it being more accessible for everyone and allowing all different neurotypes to thrive? Like, what are some of the main changes or the common themes that you've heard coming through from the people that you've spoken to?
It's been really beautiful that everybody has been sharing their journeys. Um, the beginning obviously is always fraught with like guilt and shame and what's wrong with me, and maybe even like why am I the problem kind of thing. The otherness. We all struggle from like otherness. as children, because we receive so much criticism, I think, and we aren't always accepted by our peer groups, no matter how hard we try, and we might never just be able to understand why. But it's always about at some point, they turn a corner with some kind of self-acceptance. Like, okay, this is just how my brain works. Okay, well, I just can't be in crowded spaces for too long, or I need headphones when I am. It's about learning what you need and why, so that you can have the compassion to give it to yourself. I think the most common thing that people come on here and talk about is emotional regulation strategies and how necessary they are to success of any kind. Continuing any kind of project, any kind of consistency, relationship, we have to know how to self-regulate. And so people always talk about how finding their thing changed everything. For some people, it's therapy and being able to finally talk about this stuff for the first time. That was not my experience with therapy. I did decades of it before it started to help me, because they thought I was like the hysterical woman, the depressed, I don't know. They didn't know what was wrong with me. AuDHD, I think. Anyway,
and
and I've just never been able to verbalize my sensory issues. My inability to regulate my emotions and my body just caused a shutdown, and I would start crying. And that was my version of going nonverbal, basically.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So,
emotional
anyway.
regulation, I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting about recently, and I think I've had an experience, like I've had a personal experience of, I talked earlier about kind of like from my primary school and secondary school, I've gone from being a kind of like happy, chatty kid to a kind of taciturn, silent, broody teenager. And I think as an adult, before pre-diagnosis, I would have described myself as relatively stable, having a relatively stable temperament. But I kind of now see that as it's because I basically pushed all my emotions down like a beach ball under the surface. And then occasionally I would have a meltdown and I would completely lose my shit. And I would sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the podcast.
That's fine.
I'd like,
Yes.
I'd lose self-control. I'd get really upset. I'd get really kind of, I don't think I got angry necessarily, but I would just not feel in control of myself. And then I would always feel a huge amount of shame and embarrassment that I'd had that kind of emotional outburst, and feel the need to kind of apologize profusely to anyone that was around me when I did that, and feel really, really embarrassed about the whole thing. And as I've tried to come to terms with kind of my emotional regulation, a lot of which has involved just getting in touch with my emotions for the first time, because I realized how much I'd pushed them down in this beach ball. And as I've gone through this journey of kind of self-identifying with almost everything under the sun, I was like, I came across alexithymia about a year ago, and I was like, oh my goodness, maybe I'm alexithymic. I'm really, really bad at being able to name and identify my emotions. It's not that I don't have emotions. It's not that I don't have empathy. It's just that I'm really, really bad at describing them or
Deciphering.
verbalizing them. Yeah, deciphering them, being able to categorize them and work out what's the difference between this, and this. And I've tried various things like the feelings wheel and trying to identify and get
the sensation wheel too.
Yeah,
is good.
and I've one of the things. Sorry, it's a really rambling roundabout way of getting to what I was going to talk about and ask you about, if you recognized it, is I experience, and I think not every neurodivergent person does, but I've read enough people on kind of forums to know that this isn't completely unique to me. I experience time in a really weird way, in that stuff that happened to me kind of 30, 20, 10 years ago can feel just as current to me as things that happened kind of 10, 5, 3 days ago. And I can remember conversations from decades back. I can remember, and it's almost like things, particularly emotional conversations or emotional situations, it's almost like they stack vertically rather than horizontally through me. And these experiences can seem like they're one on top of the other. And I think because that becomes so overwhelming, that can lead to trying to push things down, because it's like that um Everything Everywhere All at Once movie, but like in your head, with emotions and with memories and with experiences. And it's, I don't know if you have this, we have this thing, this kind of hard candy in the UK called rock, which you can get like at seasides and stuff.
Is it layers?
Writing. Well, no, it's like a kind of a tube, a cylinder of hard candy that has writing
Oh.
that goes all the way through this stick of rock, and then you bite and snap it off the top, and it still says the writing that goes all the way through it. And for me, like, almost every emotion that I've ever had, to every encounter, every experience, I feel like it vertically runs through me like a stick of rock, so that when I try and access something, everything comes bubbling back up from the past. And because that feels really overwhelming, I think that's led to a tendency to suppress it a bit. So I'm really trying with the emotional regulation, because I've just avoided emotions for the longest time. So I'm trying to do all the kind of typical stuff that
I've heard that from pretty much every man that I've ever talked to, about, just the struggles to verbalize emotions.
Interesting.
It's definitely not something that is encouraged in boys as much, even in the shows that you all tended to watch compared to the shows that we tended to watch. My Little Pony, let's care for our friends, versus like, let's blow up trucks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's probably a
Yeah,
lot
I
to that.
think from a very young age, we're definitely socialized differently. Um, I think this fact about the etymology of emotion was really interesting to me. So the word emotion comes from the Latin to move out. So I had this fascia specialist teaching me about how movement helps us process our emotions, and how when we don't process our emotions well, it gets stuck in our body as chronic pain and fascia and stuff. And I need to hear more about this for sure. But
That's really interesting.
it is really interesting. She says she has research, so I'm like really interested. But yeah, they don't understand chronic pain very well. But there is obviously soft tissue sort of nerve connections. And that would make sense that it would be related to emotions from within. Emotions from within are just um, chemical combinations. She called it like a cocktail of whatever you're feeling at that time. Um, and so when you feel that way again, it sounds sort of like almost a PTSD response, like a re-triggering, just like, oh boy, I know this feeling. Um, that does feel familiar to me.
And
The remembering.
the more you keep in, the more, I guess, there's nowhere for it to go. There's no outlet. So it kind of
Unwellness.
goes out into parts of your body. And that kind of chronic pain, I guess, can, like, I don't have the...
Hypothetically, that's what she was saying. That, yeah, the fascia is just soft tissue deposits with the chemical combinations, the hormones or whatever. Anyway, I don't know. But so yes, emotion. Gotta move that emotion out. I think my favorite way of emotional regulation is, oh gosh, okay, so it changes depending on what emotion I'm feeling, right? When I'm angry, I need something with a lot of physical activity to convince my body that I've had that fight.
Okay.
But when I'm sad, I'm more shut down. And so my nervous system really just needs to rest.
Yeah, it's that balance. It's
And
getting
sometimes I even trigger myself to cry on purpose, knowing that that's going to give me relief faster
interesting.
as well.
I still
Yeah.
find, to this day, I still find it really hard to cry. When I notice myself,
Yeah.
if I'm watching like something on TV or a movie or a documentary that's kind of emotional, I still have this subconscious. I feel the kind of the tears pricking the back of the eye, and my subconscious goes, "Stop it!" And I catch myself, and I'm like, "No, just push that down. Don't allow yourself." Which probably goes back to what you were saying about the socializing, particularly of kind of boys and girls, and don't
Yes.
don't do that. It's not particularly healthy, but it's hard to reverse a lifetime of
Oh my
subconscious
gosh, it's so
messaging
easy
that
to make me cry. I'm just crying thinking about how hard it is for you to cry.
and I know people
We'll work on that.
I feel really uncomfortable when I can be talking to friends
I
or loved
know.
ones that will cry, and I feel so awkward being in the presence of someone else that's crying because it's so unfamiliar to me, and
Mhm.
I don't really know how to react to it, and then I feel like such
So
a
I have lots of clients that are like that, so don't worry. Especially if I'm crying for them, they get really uncomfortable. And so I have this pen that like is a dinosaur, and so that makes me laugh, and I can't cry and laugh at the same time.
That's awesome.
Um,
I
yeah.
really like that.
Thank you. We have to do like hacks for ourselves. We have to know what our obstacles are and then just work with that because we can't, I could shame myself for crying and be like, oh, just do better. But that's not going to make me stop crying the next time.
Yeah.
I'll probably just be aware of it and then get even more panicked, like, oh no, I'm doing it again.
With hacks,
So,
particularly for emotional dysregulation, the thing that's worked most for me is options, which I only came to relatively recently because I think I started saying that I've been doing the whole, which is really obvious to people who have been doing therapy for a long time or who've been reading self-help books for a long time. This is just the complete basics. But for me, it's quite recent because I'm coming to it from someone who'd never even thought about emotions or mental health or self-help for so long. I was just like, well, I'll do my job and I'll see friends at the weekend and I'll feel like that's enough and I'm happy and I'll just keep going forward, which was all right until it wasn't. But now kind of over the last few years when I'm like kind of, yeah, you really weren't okay. Let's try and read a bit into how you can be okay. So it's that whole, I won't need to say to you or your audience about that whole, I'm noticing I'm having an emotion. What are the thoughts that are leading to that emotion? Do I want to have that emotional response? Can I reframe these thoughts? That whole kind of
mhm.
journey, which I've started to do. And I've actually started speaking out loud to myself. And I've had, even when I first
Yes.
started having therapy, like I would be told, have a conversation out loud for yourself. And in my head, intellectually, I'd just be like, yeah, I can see the value of that. But I wouldn't ever consider doing that because that's ridiculous that I'm going to have a conversation with myself. But more recently, I've actually
Yeah.
started doing that and taking myself through the process. And it really helps. And once you get onto that, can I reframe the thoughts that are causing this emotional reaction a little bit? Or there's that missing step, which I think is really valuable, is are these thoughts valid? And often the thoughts are, 9 times out of 10, the thoughts are valid. The thoughts that are causing the emotional reaction are valid. And you just have to accept that and be like, okay, this thing that's really upsetting me is true. It's upsetting me because it's upsetting. It's an upsetting situation. But how can I start to reframe
Mhm.
that? Can I think about it in a different way? It forces your brain, and particularly talking out loud, giving yourself that kind of self-talk about it, leads me on to the final step, which is what's really helped me, not just the process of reframing the thoughts. It's like, okay, what are my options? And give myself as many options as I can, including completely ridiculous options, like say something's pissed me off at work. Someone's asked me to do something I think is unreasonable or isn't the right decision, and I disagree with whatever, but they're a higher grade than me, so I kind of have to do it. I can be like, okay, what are my options? Well, I can either resign from my job with immediate effect and say, this completely goes against everything that I'm saying, and I, on point of principle, refuse to do it. So have my resignation forthwith. am I going to do that? I'm probably not going to do that. What other options can I do? Well, I can just call in sick. I can get a doctor's note and I can refuse to engage this with whatever long. It's like, okay, maybe that's an option. It kind of takes the heat off for a little while, but is that the best thing I can do? Or is another option part of the reframing, which is just kind of doing this part of my job does not define me as a person. It's that rigid thinking. It's that kind of black and white thinking. It's just sort of like, I'm paid to do a job. My senior has asked me to do a particular thing. I don't have to invest all of my emotions and all of my identity into delivering this thing that I don't think is the perfect solution that I would do it if I was ruler of the world. Maybe I just need to kind of like reframe that a little bit and just do what I've been asked to do and dissociate aligning so much of my own identity with that. And I'll kind of go through and get options and kind of scribble options down. And basically, if say I write half a dozen options, 4 of them are going to be so ridiculous that I'm not going to do that. And then I get left with 2, and it'll basically be calm down, don't get so emotionally het up, and just do a little thing. What's the first step you can do that's going to get you towards not feeling what I call fizzy? I get fizzy and just I'll do all those typical things, which I didn't realize again until a couple of years ago was stimming, the kind of like the hand flapping, the pacing, the kind of feeling really emotionally dysregulated. It was just like what I thought was my little embarrassing thing that nobody else did, that I just had to kind of conceal, or if I could feel my emotions getting fizzy and bubbling up and the hands would start going, I'd be like, all right, I have to get to a toilet cubicle and then just do that so no one can kind of see me, and then try and calm myself down. But I didn't really have the methodology or the framework to calm myself down. So I could sometimes stay angry or fizzy for a long time. So going through that process and giving myself options are, I think, the main hack that started working for me. And the more I practice it, the faster I can go through the process. When I start to recognize, when I do these little tells, it's the physical, it's noticing the physical tells. So if I can see myself, if I can catch myself getting up and pacing around, or looking to my vape and vaping, or I can see my hands starting to go, like, okay, these are the things. You're feeling dysregulated. You're having an emotional response to something. Whereas before, I didn't have the framework of the language to describe all that. I'd just be basically what my ex-partner used to call my chicken hands. She'd be like, are you having an argument?
I'm freaking out.
Yeah. Like, are you having an argument with someone in your head? You've got the chicken hands, and be like, what? And I didn't even see myself doing it or feel myself doing it. So yeah, recognizing those physical symptoms, going through the process, talking out loud to myself, giving myself options. That's, I think, been the main hack for me that I've got out of going through various people's responses and trying to regulate my own emotions. But different things work for different people. And it goes back to that, what we were
Different
talking
things
about.
work every day.
Yeah.
Sadly. And that's okay. We need novelty or whatever. We also hate doing the same exact thing every day. So that's part of the problem. It goes back to what you said about having like ADHD or autistic ascendant days, where like one day your autism is really on fire and maybe you want to stay organized, and then like the next day your ADHD takes over and it's like, yeah, I'm not sticking to that plan actually.
Yeah. That's been getting both diagnoses. And I should say, I think I said it earlier in our chat, it's just when you were talking a couple of minutes ago about person first language, I still trip myself up over that. I think I said towards the beginning
Me too.
that I was diagnosed with autism and with ADHD, and it's like, you don't, like, autism is not a
You
thing.
don't need to trip yourself up over that.
It's not a
But
badge
I
that you
know
pick up as an accessory and carry around like, I'm autistic. I don't have autism. But yeah, like it's like, yeah, it's one of those things, the language that's used. I think that sort of thing bothers me less than others. And I know like other people can get really, really exercised over people that still use Asperger's rather than saying they're autistic. And that kind of thing bothers me less than it bothers others. I think for me, it's about the understanding and self-knowledge and compassion. Like, it doesn't entirely matter to me, and I understand all the historical associations with that name and can be very triggering for a lot of people. So I can see both sides of the argument, but I can also recognize it's very, very difficult when someone has been diagnosed, say 20 years ago, as Asperger's, and like completely identifies with that, and it's given them a sense of peace. To be told all of a sudden you can't use that as an identity anymore must be incredibly difficult to wrench yourself away from, and be kind of from having been told you're wrong half your life to finally being given identity when you're not wrong, to then 20 years later being told now that identity is wrong and you can't be told that you can't use that name for
Yeah,
yourself anymore. It's really hard.
it does. I definitely stay out of the identity wars.
I think
I
that's
think,
wise.
like you said, people are gonna wanna say sort of what they want. It's just really interesting to notice how, like, automatic some of the language that we use is, especially when it's used to, like, guilt or shame us.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I
what
completely
we're
went off
used
into a cul-de-sac. I was going to talk about the ascendant thing, but
oh,
the way that I kind of conceptualize it, being both autistic and ADHD, and we talked about that the first time we spoke. Like, I see it as kind of scales and a balance, and I hadn't real, and it makes so much more sense. And I think, again, when we spoke the first time, I said that for many years I had this secret worry that I was schizophrenic, because I felt so powerfully these two different personalities, which could be ascendant with me on any given day, and I didn't seem to have any control over which one of them would be which. And I now think of it as, yeah, there's kind of balance, these scales, as having ADHD ascendant days and autistic ascendant days. I got to the scales thing because when I first worked this out about myself, I told one of my therapists, I described it as the autism monster and the ADHD monster, because that made sense in my head. And my therapist was like, no, 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 you must not describe them as monsters. They're very beautiful. I was like, okay, it's how I'm picturing it, right? But okay, if you don't want me to describe it like that, I won't describe it like that, even though that's what it felt like. But I've now got used to having the scales in my head. And on my ADHD ascendant days, I'm absolutely happy, like going into the office, brainstorming with colleagues, trying to think of solutions to things. I get really fired up by that. I'm like, okay, let's do that. As long as the group's like no bigger than about 5 people, any bigger than that. And I'm like, I cannot process more than 5
it's
voices
a
at
lot
once.
of
This is just static, and you're not going to get anything out of me. I'm just going to go into shutdown. But there are other days when my autism's in ascendancy, I'm just like, I do not even want to have a conversation with another human being. I don't want to have contact with another human being. I just want silence, and like anything like hearing people walk past or hearing like a crisp bag blowing around in the wind is just going to completely send shivers through me, and like everything just feels overwhelming, and I just want to be in a bubble. And there's absolutely no point in trying to get myself onto a group call or going out to see friends after work. I'm just like, and I think in the past I would try and force myself through those
mhm,
things. Is like, oh, it's not cool. I've had like,
and suffer.
yeah, and suffer. And then I would have burnouts. I'd have these mini burnouts. And I've completely signed up to spoon theory. That was another one of my hacks and revelations. And trying to monitor my spoons with how much sleep I've got, how much sleep debt I've got, how much the previous day has taken out of me. Because what I found with trying to work out my own little version of spoon theory that works for me, which has been a bit of trial and error basis, is if I've had a mega intense day the day before that's taken, I don't know, like 10 spoons out of me. If say like I started the day before on like 7 spoons, and I don't my default is however many hours of sleep. I don't know, people do spoons different ways. The way that I do is however many hours of sleep I've had. So if I've had 7 hours of sleep as a default, that's 7 spoons. But if the day before I've used up 10 spoons, I've overpushed myself, I've had lots of work meetings, I went out and did a social thing, that I've ended the day on, I've used up 10
Mm.
spoons, I'm ending the day on -3. So the next day, even if I get 7 hours sleep, that's -3. I'm starting -3. So I'm only starting the day on 4 spoons. So I have to kind of like take it easy. And I think in the past, I'll push myself and push myself and push myself, and probably ended up on like about minus 30 spoons. And that's when the burnout happens. And that's like, I can't do
Sure.
anything for a week. I'm just like in bed for a week. So trying to pace myself and trying to monitor myself. But again, this is like the magpie thing.
But that's not depression. It sounds like depression when you say, oh, I stay in bed for a week, but it's not. You're
Burnout.
just so tired.
It's crushing fatigue and burnout. And again, before like autism burnouts or ADHD burnouts were on my radar, I would call them heavy boot days, because I didn't have the vocabulary to describe it. And I'd just be like, no, I can't get up today. I've got heavy boot days. And yeah, again, people thought that I had depression, and it was just, I was feeling depressed and there wasn't any kind of reason for it. But no, it's burnout. It's energy management and over pushing yourself. Learning to pace yourself and be kind to yourself. But because none of this was explained to you as a kid or a young adult, you just, I mean, it shouldn't take a breakdown. It shouldn't take a burnout to realize these things. But I think for a lot of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s and older that have been undiagnosed and don't get a diagnosis until later in life, I think it quite often takes a really severe shock to the system, a breakdown or a burnout, to kind of realize there's something more going on with you than you have the framework or the vocabulary to describe. And it sucks, and it shouldn't be like that. And I know that things are getting better for neurodivergent kids than they were certainly a couple of decades ago. It's improving day by day. But I think there's clearly thousands, if not millions, of older neurodivergent adults that are struggling through all this, and they have no idea, as I didn't until a few years ago. They have no idea they're neurodivergent. They just think they're weird or incapable or quirky or don't quite know how to get by. And that's really, really sad. And I wish there was a way I could help them. I'm hoping that in some small way, my channel, the Am I Neurodivergent, was specifically about the late diagnosis, and getting there can contribute to that. And if I ever finish the 52 videos, I'm on about 41 at the moment, and got kind of bogged down in that, I'm going to try and turn the scripts into a book as well. And I think late diagnosis is something that's not being discussed a huge amount, and there's a lot of unhappy middle-aged people out there struggling with this
for so many reasons. Yes. Yes, that's very true though. Amazing. Struan, it's been wonderful chatting with you today. So now is the portion where we need to plug your channel again, which it's great that you were just mentioning it.
Am I Neurodivergent on YouTube? Go and have a look at it. I'm not on. You asked me beforehand about kind of socials, and I'm really bad at all that. I don't have like a linked Facebook or Insta or anything like that. I've just got my YouTube channel, and if I ever get around to finishing the videos and turning it into a book, I'll try and make a website as well. But yeah, just on YouTube / Am I Neurodivergent, I've got my 40 odd videos, which I'm gonna start adding to, particularly if I take the plunge and leave the civil service and give myself a little bit of time out, which I'm planning to do. Don't give me the time to finish that. And the feedback that I've had from the channel has been really nice, and does give me the motivation to go on, particularly people who are kind of my age or older and are kind of going through this journey and have kind of stumbled across my page or had my page suggested, that goes through that kind of sequential, or at least started off that way, kind of week by week. Not beating yourself up if you freak out a little bit about realizing this, because you do particularly when you're older, you haven't realized this. You can freak out a little bit, and that's okay. You go through the imposter syndrome,
bargaining, denial, anger.
Yeah. It's like those stages of grief, because I think you do. When you get a late diagnosis, you kind of you grieve a little bit, not because you've suddenly realized your identity is different, but because you realize that kind of your teens and 20s and 30s could have been a lot different. You could have been a lot kinder to yourself.
Things could have been easier.
Things would have been easier if you'd known this about yourself. And that's where the grief comes in, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So everyone who's listening should go check out Struan's YouTube channel. Yeah, wonderful. Amazing. Okay, so last question is going to be from my new Delve deck, the Joy
The thing I've
Edition.
been dreading because it's unpredictable.
It's great.
Are you doing the fancy shuffling? Do that on screen.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'll probably mess it up.
Don't do it on screen.
I can't do it in the air though.
Oh, that worked.
Maybe I can.
Smooth.
Kind of in the air. Not as smooth as if I were like a casino lady. Anyway, thank you for that encouragement. Okay. Oh gosh, this feels deep.
Oh no.
So
I don't do deep. I push the beach ball down. I plead the fifth.
the beach ball. What restores your faith in humanity?
What restores my faith in humanity?
I'll think about this one too.
Kindness, I think. More than anything is kindness. And you see a lot of it in the neurodivergent space, whether that's kind of online, in forums, in person. It's that empathy and understanding. And I think particularly for people who have tried to put themselves in a bubble, have felt different, have felt less than. And suddenly, particularly with a late diagnosis, you suddenly have this sense of community, whether it's just online, whether it's just chatting to people like yourself that live on the other side of the world. It's feeling like you're not alone. You're not going through all this alone. And it's just those discussions and common experiences, and people, when you describe your own experiences, people are not kind of looking at you like, what are you talking about? That's like, I don't, and then you clam up even more and more. But having that knowledge that there's not anything wrong with you, your brain's just wired a little bit differently, and there's a hell of a lot of other people out there whose brains are wired a little bit differently too, that may not experience life in exactly the same way as you, but have quite a lot of overlap and similarities, and have a similar mindset and see things the same way. Just talking and connecting with people who are kind of similar to you, it's that sense of kindness that you're not being dismissed, you're not being kind of, that's the thing that will make humanity better for neurodivergent people and for neurotypical people. And it's understanding, it's empathy. And I think the more that channels like yours and similar channels that are just talking about all these things and moving the conversation on and widening it, the more it just becomes part of everyday discourse and everyday life and everyday understanding. And it can only increase kindness and empathy. And yeah, it's what you're doing and what other people like you are doing. That's what will make the world a better place.
That is what the research shows. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we do have to keep talking about things, even if it's not always comfortable, or even if it like has negative consequences for us sometimes. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, kindness is really important. But I think I don't want to pretend like my faith in humanity is completely restored, but I've got 2 children. And so watching them it does a lot for restoring my faith in humanity, because I get to watch them with other kids too, and just how they like recognize that people are different, but it's not like a thing that makes them want to stay away from anyone. My middle schooler's getting a little bit snippy, a little bit mean, but we'll address that. But in the past, like, it's always been like, okay, we're just different. Like, okay, you just look different. Like, you just sound different.
Kids are incredibly accepting of difference.
Kids are so curious. Yeah. And yeah, it is accepting. They just want to understand, I think. I relate to that.
And it's the older they get, the kind of more toxic messaging they get from adults, that's when the change starts to happen, and you can get that.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what we're seeing, a similar situation with my middle schooler as you had, unfortunately, where like just got too many report cards in a row that said, like, this kid is distracting other kids. So now it's more like of the reserved. But also, the work is getting harder. There's a lot more work that he has to do. And I just don't think that his neurodivergent brain wants to move that fast. And I just wish the world wouldn't make him.
Yeah, it resonates.
I have a dream.
Yeah, everything. I think a lot of us have a dream. It's how do we put that? But yeah, particularly on the ADHD side of things, like how do you convert that dream into action? And that, yeah. Let's have another one of these chats in due course, and we can figure out how to put the dream into action.
We should. We absolutely should. It doesn't even have to be a podcast. If you want, I'll teach you how to be an ADHD coach.
Yeah, I was asking about that. That's something if and when I leave the civil service, there's so many things I want to do. I want to finish my novel. I want to finish my videos. I want to convert the video scripts into a book. I also want to look into AuDHD coaching, but there's not an awful lot of instructional courses on how to be an AuDHD coach.
We get to make it.
And that kind of like both excites and terrifies me, because I think I'm terrified of getting things wrong and causing damage. And I don't want to give advice that works for me to someone else that's going to set them off on it's going to be wrong for them. Because I've had so much therapy, and we talked earlier about there must be so many therapists that have given neurodivergent people neurotypical advice that has caused them more harm than good. And I don't want my particular sprinkles or toppings of neurodivergence, the advice that works for me, to give it to someone else, and that's going to be wrong for them. So that's really hard.
Such a wonderful thing. Like, how people say, oh, I don't know if I'm a good parent. Like, just the fact that you're wondering about it means that you are.
Yeah.
That seems like really good, like, intention and ethics.
So I guess it's just doing something like that. It's a lot of check-ins just to kind of check is what I'm saying resonating with you? Is it something you think you'd want to try? Is it kind of is there something in you that's saying that's not right? So it's just a lot of sense checking. But yeah, we should definitely have a talk. I'd love to pick your brain about coaching more at some point.
So cool. Well, it was really nice to meet with you. I'm just going to stop recording.
Cool. Yeah, really lovely to chat with you again as well.
Thanks for being here. If you want to connect with the Neurodivergent Report, you can find us at ND Report Pod on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, Substack, etc.
If you're looking to support the show, the best thing you can do is subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Please do that.
And hey, if you want to check out more about us, visit our website at ndreportpod.com. And you can also go there if you want to be a guest contributor on the show.
Until next time, be well, do good.
Bye.